welcome to another episode of Just More Fix. This is James. With me in this episode is Lacey.
Hey.
You can find us online at justmorefix.com or on Twitter at justmorefix. If you like us, you can support us at patreon.com, and you can give us a rating and review at iTunes or wherever you find us at. In this episode, we're going to have another gaming roundtable. And now, it's time to get our gaming fix.
I'm Chris from All Things Good and Nerdy, a proud member of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're listening to right now. The opinions expressed are those of the individual hosts. Make sure you check out all the other great podcasts at GonnaGeekNetwork.com and get ready, because geekiness begins in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Just More Fix. A couple quick announcements before we get things rolling today. First thing is we will be at ISUCon, which happens this coming Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and we will be there for Saturday, so hopefully we can connect with any of you guys that are going to be at ISUCon and in the Terre Haute area. We will also be running games at Game in Terre Haute. It's so awkward to say sometimes. On September 8th from 5 to 9 there, and I'm going to be running Spirit of 77, and Lacey is going to be running Dread, I believe, and we may have a third game depending on how many people show up. So I hope to see you there at Game on September 8th. And I think that is all of the announcements. So you obviously heard in the intro that we are going to be doing we're going to be doing a gaming roundtable today. First thing I thought would be cool to mention is we have gotten a ton of requests from game designers and stuff for interviews. So you're going to be hopefully seeing, as they get produced, several more interviews coming out from us with some other game designers. The most recent one was recorded at the end of Gen Con, which will be coming out next Wednesday, is our interview with Jonathan Tweet and James Radji, and had a really good time sitting down with them, and that was a really good interview and whatnot. So look for that one next week. It is already up on our Patreon, so if you are a Patreon supporter, it's been up there for like 3 weeks now, I think. So as soon as that one got done, I put those out. So regardless of how the release schedule works for the interviews, if you are a Patreon supporter, as soon as the interviews will get done, they will go up on there so that they can be out on the Patreon, because our goal isn't to really change the format of the show, but we want to do a bunch of these interviews because there's a lot of really cool stuff coming out, and we've got some cool opportunities. So look for those coming very soon. Also, we're going to try and get back on track with reviews, because we have slacked off on reviews because we reviewed most of the games we play.
I'm sure there's some that we've missed.
Yeah, I know there are, but the ones that we play the most consistently, I think we've got most of them. But there are several that we have missed, Night Witches being among them, and I feel like we have a firm grasp of Night Witches now to be able to review it.
Yeah.
What? What?
Did we review Bluebeard's Bride yet?
I think we did. No?
I feel like we did.
I remember making a promo for it. I think we did
Pretty
review
sure.
Bluebird's Bride. Another great game, but also V5, hopefully coming very soon, and the Genesis, so look for those coming very quick. I was reading the Pip core system today as well.
Where did I put that book?
It's on the top shelf with the indie games. So just so you guys all know, our game section is broken up by shelves. The top shelf is all indie game stuff. The second shelf is basically OSR, LOTFP stuff, followed by, what's on the third one down?
Burning Wheel?
No, that's on the OSR shelf, even though it's not really OSR. But
Vampire?
whatever. I think there's some vampire stuff there. The bottom shelf is all Wraith. Oh, and Changing the Lost.
I thought the bottom shelf was the old D&D box sets.
There's only one there. I took it off because I had to make room for more Genesis.
Oh.
So
Seems like a solid choice to me.
It was demoted. I know we haven't used it in a long time. It's all good. But I digress. We also do have the best gaming shelf because by sheer luck, we happen to be in a used furniture store. And there was an old comic and gaming store in the Champaign area called...
Oh, yeah, the Habitat for Humanity Restore.
Yeah,
That's
Action
nice.
Comics, I think is what the store was called. But they happened to have a gaming display shelf there that was a white shelf. It's got like five shelves on it, I believe. And they say it's a TSR shelf from once upon a time when TSR was still a thing. So we saw it, and I stared at it in disbelief for a solid few minutes, and then tried to find a way to miracle it into our car because we didn't bring our truck with us that day. So,
meanwhile, I was like, why are you staring at that shelf? What's TSR?
well, you see, when I was a young lad and just beginning gaming, TSR was about all there was. But so But it's awesome, and it's our gaming shelf now. It makes me kind of sad because it's too full, and you can't see the TSR on the shelf back. You know, it makes me want to like get another shelf and move books so that you can actually see the TSR part of it. But you know, we don't have enough shelves.
There aren't enough shelves in the world.
True that. True that. All right. Well, do you just want to talk about our recent gaming exploits a little bit, and then we'll kind of just wander through what we usually do?
Sure. Are we going to do that in any kind of like logical, thematic sort of order?
I thought we'd just start off with RPGs. I don't know.
Okay. Well, we recorded another session of Night Witches.
Right on.
Which I still love as a game, and I almost cried. And it was good. Yeah. I was really emotional that day anyway. There was a lot of wine. I don't know. Yeah.
So, spoiler alert, I guess. There's a letter that arrives, and I wrote it, and when I gave it to you, you didn't want to read it initially. She's like, I'm not going to read it. And it made sense. And then I was like, no, we got to read this. You've got to read this, you know. And so I'm very glad that you know, you ended up reading it or whatever.
In character, I wouldn't have read it right then.
I know. No,
There's a strong sense of denial.
I understand why. It totally made sense. But I was like, oh, no. Like, it's such a cool moment. And I wanted it to sort of be read. And that was a cool thing to kind of finish on, to wash over everyone, the finality of everything or whatever. So
I don't really want to say any more about it because I don't want to give like any spoilers away for people that are going to listen. But yeah, no, the letter wasn't what really got me. There was.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was before that. So.
What was it?
I don't want to tell you because I don't want to ruin it.
Write it down. I'm curious now. It's going to bother me.
I'll tell you later.
No, write it down because you'll forget. No, write it.
No, won't forget.
Please write it down. I wanted to.
We're having a marital dispute
over the Night Witches game. Things that really matter. Oh, yeah. That was pretty crafty, wasn't it?
Yeah. That was a tearjerker.
I know. It was good.
So, anyway, this is why I don't like romance and RPGs.
So, speaking of Night Witches.
It's like when your friend tells you to watch The Notebook, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's like giving them a time bomb. Like, here, this is so cool. Hold it for me. Okay.
Well, I've got to say.
And later you're like, why?
I've ran a ton of games, right? And this one, I think it may, it's one of the things I toyed about as an episode theme or whatever, but like, this has been one of the best games that I think I have ran in a long time. And I mean, we've got great players on the table, and also the dynamic at the table is different. So I don't know if it's encouraging me to be more creative and do more because our table dynamic is different. Mm-hmm. So then it brings different things out of me. And also I'm trying to make the game its own thing and have a different voice than the other stuff that I've ran. And it's challenged me in some other ways because like basically now there are 4 romantic plots running inside the game, but they're all different. Mm-hmm. And that's something I really wanted to work on is to make, I didn't want to have it all be straightforward, nice, clean, easy, you know, romantic plots.
Like real life.
Yeah.
This is fiction.
But it was, so it was interesting and challenging to sort of do that and see how things would play out and how players would pick up and do different things. And I also tried to make a point with Carrie to do something because she's the one that likes to grab on to those kind of plots generally in the games that we play. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do something drastically different. And I want to have this romantic plot and then like try and break her character in a way, you know, and see how she would react to it or whatever, just to see how it would go. And it's been fun. I've enjoyed it a whole lot. It's way different though. And actually there was an email.
I think she'll be way more upset when she ends up inevitably getting me killed.
Oh, yes, true. That is true. That is true. That was a great session because there's a lot of things changed in that one. So if you guys aren't already listened to our Night Witches episodes, the first few are kind of slow because it's like training and whatnot, and we're also familiarizing ourselves with the rules system. We already knew Powered by the Apocalypse, but specifically the Night Witches version of it. And then after that, it really starts to pick up, and there's some great highs and really, really bad lows in that game. So definitely worth a listen, especially if you want to try to understand Apocalypse World. It's a great example of how the succeed at a cost works and picking things off of the list and whatnot. So it's been great fun. All right, if we say too much more, we're probably going to spoil things. I'll shut up. But
I think the game is also a really good example of giving your players some agency and picking negative consequences. Because while generally you're telling us what happens as a result of the failure or semi-success, occasionally one of us will chime in about something we think is appropriate, either for our character or for another person's character. And it'll be maybe something that's slightly better than what you had thought. Right. And we'll take that instead and kind of run with it.
Well, it's really... In running that game and some of the other Apocalypse Worlds games, I have adopted the phrase now, what does that look like to you? What does this failure look like to you? And in general, when I first started doing it, it was more about like, what does a success like to you? Like, what would be the best thing to happen to you in the situation? And then I was like, well, what if I switched that and turned it on its head a little bit and said, what's the worst thing that you see happening right here? And then thankfully, we have good players at the table that are willing to embrace that total disastrous failure and are all about being this right here. This is how things go terribly wrong for me, and rolling with it and increasing the drama. Because that's really what happens because a lot of those. So
there's just a lot of good embracing the story as opposed to just trying to. I mean, there's some trying to live as well, but
yeah. Well, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, I don't think you should go. I think if you go into those style games and you're totally sort of reckless and suicidal, it sort of takes the impact of what is happening out of it as well. At the same time, I think if you reach that point because your character is broken, then I think that's fun too. You know, that has its own sort of sense of drama that the senior lieutenant has just broken, shell-shocked, or whatever the Russian term is for in World War II for that, and they just sort of go off the deep end.
Why'd you have to pick the senior lieutenant?
You're not a senior lieutenant. Oh, you just... oh, well, you know. So, something for us. I've been playing Night Witches, and I could go on and on about it all day, but I don't want to do it too much because I know I will let some things slip that would rather have them come out through the gameplay. But I just got the PDF of the... I don't want to say the title of the system wrong. It is NGR. I backed it on Kickstarter. It's the Neoclassical Geek Revival by Josh Rotman. He's written several other...
I've seen that.
Lamentations and OSR stuff. So I backed it on Kickstarter, and I also picked the version that has the Scrap Princess art in it. I just started going through it, and I'm pretty excited about it. It looks like a pretty interesting combination between some classic OSR stuff with some more modern storytelling elements to it. So you have the classic 6 attributes and stuff, but there's also more mechanics for mental and social conflict as well. So I haven't dug into it entirely, but I'm super excited to check it out. And the Scenic Dunsmith adventure is one of the best things I've ever seen put together, and that's done by the same person. So I'm super excited to dig into that and see. And there's also like 5 other adventures that came with the Kickstarter that I'm looking to dig through. And basically, I have decided that I have too many OSR adventures that I'm never going to get to run because games, life. But so I'm super excited for that. Looks easy, fun, and I like bringing other elements of things into the LOTFP a little bit to change it up a little bit, because I like the advantage disadvantage thing from 5th edition. I think it's a super cool thing, and I sort of brought that in there. And then the Eldritch Cock stuff I brought in from the back of that book and whatnot. So looking forward to that.
Well, I was at work, but Isaiah continues with the Fate Pokemon adaptation for you and our kids, which
True.
I heard something about Team Rocket's Skyscraper and a Mewtwo that was called.
No, it was just a Mew.
Sorry, a Mew. My bad,
yeah.
A Mew.
Yeah, somehow
our kids were very excited about it. They were telling me about it the next day. So.
Ezekiel climbed a skyscraper more or less somehow with nails and a hammer. I don't think they had a concept of how tall a skyscraper actually is, which was kind of entertaining it to be at the table for that. So. And then we stopped at the top of the skyscraper, so it has to be a dramatic escape with this Mew from Team Rocket. So it's been fun. Speaking of which, we have some things coming up about gaming and kids and whatever that I think is going to move forward that we're going to have. That's
some more discussion about kids and games and whatnot. So.
Right on. So I have 10 candles on my list. I pitched it to Holly, who was in our Night Witches game, for us to play with her and her husband. And I'm not sure how or when I'm going to make it happen, but I'm excited to try it again and do it differently. I like the idea of that terrible tragedy game and trying to make it work, because there's some things that I think I would have changed a little bit from the actual play that we recorded to do, and push in a couple different ways maybe, and see if I can't run another great tragic game, because I love tragedy stuff. I just think it's awesome.
That was probably the most impactful game I had played in a long time.
Really?
When we played that one. Yeah, and it really is the replaying of the thing at the beginning. It's just like emotionally
it's intense. So charged.
And it reminds me
I kind of wish you didn't tell Holly that, because I was like, oh no, because it's like
well, I mean, you do it at the very beginning,
right,
that you record it, and you told us we were going to listen to it, and I was like, yeah, whatever, no big deal. Okay. But then the moment actually comes around and you're like, oh wow, I'm dead now.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing that, and it sounds...
Well, and it's in the dark, which makes it even better.
I don't know. It kind of reminded me of the idea I saw on Twitter, and now I'm going to mess it up because I can't remember exactly which person put it, but it was somebody in the Gauntlet RPG network, but about allowing an in-character recap for people at the end of the session, which I think is a very cool idea. And we've done that for LARPs, but we've never done it for tabletop games. Correct. We always do the Roses and Thorns where you get an out-of-character kind of wrap-up, but I like the idea of the in-character wrap-up.
So I think we actually did the Roses and Thorns after our last night witch's session, and I know we talk about the Roses and Thorns thing, but I thought I recorded it because I wanted to use it to play so people could listen to it so they could actually see how ours go. Because it's easy to say, but like to say you're going to do it at the table, but sometimes some of the feedback you get isn't very good. So it's like supposed to be something very specific. This thing I liked, this thing I didn't like. And so that way it could serve as an example for other people out there that wanted to listen to something or whatever. So
as a GM, I find it to be absolutely invaluable.
I agree.
To force someone to give you feedback that isn't wishy-washy. Right. Be like, that's it. You're not leaving my table until you tell me something good and something bad.
You don't let them off the hook. And also, there are people who are a little more reluctant to give bad feedback or just say something that they didn't care for. But I think once you've got people who you know are better at doing that, and you have them go first and sort of work around towards them, the person who struggles with it, by the time it gets them, it's sort of like, oh yeah, that thing too, I didn't like that, and this, and they sort of open up more, and it's sort of clears the air to have a more open discussion about that kind of stuff, assuming everyone's okay with doing it and doing it constructively, right? So we played V5, actually played the completed version. What were we're going to do a big review once we've got several sessions on our belt. What were your initial impressions of V5?
I liked it, but I don't remember a whole lot of dice rolling on my part, but that's because I'm not really good at anything that we've put to use yet.
Right. Well, and it was the first session, which is always kind of wonky anyway.
So I'm not like upset about that. Like there was still role playing happening. There just wasn't a lot of like things that required testing.
Die rolls, yeah.
There were some, like using resource and influence actions, which don't necessarily require that kind of thing. I like that I liked the concept map, and there was kind of a pull to try and like make relationships different. So it's not all, oh, I'm in control of, you established a clear who's in control of this relationship.
Right.
Was that built in the system, or was that just something you decided?
No. So when you write two names down on the relationship map, you draw a line between them, and whoever has the upper hand in the relationship, the arrow points to that person. And then at each end, you write how you fit into that relationship. So the idea being that...
I liked that because you defined both who had the dominant hand in the relationship, but you also defined each person's perception of the other side of the group.
And while... that I think that it's much more codified in V5, but they were already doing that in some of the By Night books, but it was done so that you could see how the city leadership sort of worked. It's in the New Orleans By Night. I remember specifically the chart because I use that one a lot, and it was already there. So like this person, like I would view you as a fool, and then you would view me as a easily manipulated puppet or whatever it is. And it was already in there, but it wasn't codified for the players to use for themselves. And I think it's a really cool way to take an old idea and make it completely relevant and new and impact the game in huge ways. That's a lot of fun to see.
I like seeing everybody else's too, because it gives me an idea, even if I'm not going to pretend I know what your connection is, because obviously that's kind of a meta move or whatever, but I can at least know some of the other people that exist in the world. Because while Terre Haute is a bigger place, it's not a huge place. No. It's not like New York City, There's a decent chance that whoever this person is, especially if they're enough of a person of enough consequence that you have some kind of influence with them or have them as an ally, odds are I've at least heard their name or seen them or know who they are in the world.
Well, in a game about relationships and politics, it almost reminds the storyteller as we're running this game, and you say, I want to go find this tech person who can do this stuff for me, and it's right there on the map. So the idea in my mind is to reinforce to the storyteller, use these NPCs and these characters in the world to make a much more tangled web, so that I don't invent a new character for you to go interact with. There's already one that exists. So when you go find someone, it happens to be that guy, and unless the situation dictates a new person or whatever. But I think it's more a more fun and direct and visual way to make all this tangled mess, because that's what Masquerade is and Vampire is, and that's where those games really shine, is where you have this tangled web of deception and threads and ties to one another. So when you pull on one string, 15 other ones downstream move, and that's where things get really interesting. It also builds a much more realistic world of consequence and the enemy of my enemy and all that kind of good stuff. I had a great time with it. I really enjoyed it. There's some things I noticed in terms of running the game that were pretty different. And granted, we're running a much different game. So all the characters in the game, except for I think one, are Thin Bloods, which changes things significantly. But I wanted to run a different kind of vampire game. I didn't want to fall into the old habits. I wanted to run something completely fresh and new and really sort of dig in and do something different with it, which is where the Thin Blood idea came from. But the way the touchstones work, I think, and convictions work, I think it's probably going to turn into an entire episode about how to sort of do a better job of putting those together and tying your character into the real world, because they were amazing. And when you're laying them out on the relationship map, you just see all these pieces that connect the characters to the world and make them sort of important in their own way. So even if you're not an influential character, you still have 5-6 ties in the world that can be pulled on. To manipulate or to extort you or whatever. And I think that's super interesting and cool. There's almost no way to have a murder hobo anymore. The Nosferatu that isn't connected to anybody anymore or whatever. And I think it has a lot of potential.
I like the touchstones a lot, and the idea of virtues and picking out like core truths for your person. But sometimes, depending on what those are, it's very hard to tie that to some kind of aspect of humanity that's easily represented in a person. And I'm sure that's probably kind of like fate aspects, where the more that you do it, probably the easier it gets. But it took a lot of effort and mental stress to try and put that together, especially when you're not somebody if you're playing more of an introverted person, or your concepts are maybe a little more abstract, and I don't know what exactly I'm trying to say, but that part was hard.
I agree. And when you sort of sit down in the vampire mindset, part of it is I feel like you're a vampire. I'm supposed to be separate from humanity. Like I want to play up this beast and this person, the horror, and what I've become. And part of shifting into that mindset is about not connecting to humanity anymore, right? And you're sort of doing the opposite of that with the touchstones. But I think it adds an interesting aspect to the game. It's just sort of different. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's definitely more work than the whole pick one of the 7 cardinal virtues and one of the 7 deadly sins, and voila.
I think
I think the juice will be worth the squeeze. But.
Oh yeah, I think so too. I think it front loads character creation and drama and building a world in the same way that doing it in Fate does, where you each sort of connect yourselves together. So you instead of connecting yourselves to the other characters on the table, you're connecting yourselves to the world, which is really what Vampire is in a way. So.
I'm good at creating like social connections and that, but I think this is one of those gamer baggage things where I'm used to putting the dots on the paper and then kind of finding out who my character is through gameplay.
Yeah.
And so then this is more difficult for me.
Well, it talks about in there about you don't have to make all 3 at once. You could just do one and then sort of add more as the game goes by, which kind of makes sense in a way if you wanted to flesh things out a little bit more as you went along.
I might like that better.
Right. So what did you think about the game tenets, the Chronicle tenets? Did you like the idea of that?
Chronicle tenets.
Where we made 3 sort of more or less like thematic rules for the game, for where we draw a line of things that are true in the game world. So one of ours was the guilty will suffer, and I can't remember what all 3 of them were now. They're all sort of like Gothic in theme, so I wanted to run a neo-Gothic kind of game.
I don't know. It seemed like you pretty much just picked all of those.
Well,
they seem like they would be wicked helpful to keep you on track if you were running the game, but they're nice to know up front.
Yeah.
As a player, but Like, I don't feel like I had any hand in like picking those.
No, and when we sat down to make them, there were supposed to be like hard stops for things, but and our table works a little differently than most, because in the book it talks about sort of trying to pick those as a group. But I know our vampire games, we've played so much, I kind of already kind of know in a way what to expect, and the reason I chose them and sort of laid them out to everybody to say, is everyone okay with these, is because I wanted to run a different style of vampire game. So I didn't want to have you guys sort of make them in a way where it would put us into the same kind of feel of game. You know what I'm saying?
I think it would be hard to let your players decide those at the first session unless you really hadn't planned anything at all and were just doing like a session 0 kind of thing, and then going back after that and planning out what you're going to do from that point, which is totally fine. But I think if you're sitting down with actually your game in mind already,
it's going to be hard.
Like session 1 kind of thing, then not so much going to work if one of the core concept doesn't line up with what you had planned.
Right on. So a lot more of V5 to come. I had a great time running the first session of it, but like all of our reviews, we want to have a solid feel for grounding in rules and feel and theme and tone and all that stuff before we do our actual review. I
think overall, I would say there wasn't anything that was added that I felt like changed the tone to the point where it didn't feel like we were playing World of Darkness Vampire anymore.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like it was very much the same game, and everything that was added seemed like it added depth to what had already been there without adding things that overly complicated it.
And that were also, they added to the game. They added to, I guess, without changing the theme and tone, they added to it in a positive way. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right.
Plus, new merits to read through. So flaws, that's always it's kind of my favorite part. You read through and you're like, oh God, I don't want that.
Right. Who would take that? Oh my, yeah.
I did like the forced amount of merits and flaws for this.
Yeah,
I thought it was a good idea
flaws.
too.
Also,
I mean, you could always balance out the tap with them before, but I think it's nice to say you have to take flaws.
I think it's fun. It adds a certain amount of character to your character. That's really kind of lame, but you know what I'm saying? So we got to mention Degenesis. I'm really kind of disappointed because Carrie pitched to me running the Black Atlantic campaign while Lee ran the In Thy Blood side of the campaign, and I was all about it. And I mentioned it to Lee, and he really wants to run Fate of the Norn first. And I was kind of bummed because I like the idea of that game, and it seems really cool, but Degenesis. So
I've already got a character. I'm good to go.
Yeah, well, for Fate of the Norn.
Yeah.
Me too. But Carrie lost them.
What?
Yeah.
Is that really? Nobody told me that.
So Lee told me that she took him out of the folder and moved him somewhere, but she didn't remember where it was, and they were looking for him. I don't know. So you do also have a Degenesis character from my game, so it's all good.
I do.
Yeah.
I'm good with that. I'm good to play either one. I like games.
Me too. Well, you want to move on to board games or video games, or?
I have some RPGs that we haven't played yet, but I wanted to mention.
Go for it.
So I read all of the Velvet Glove notebook that we picked up at Gen Con because it's small and concise and on my length of things I can read at this moment in time. So I could finish it in a day.
Right.
So the notebook is a shorter kind of
like an
taste of an RPG,
game,
I guess. Everything is there that you need in order to run Velvet Glove, but the actual entire thing is in development right now. And so it's by Sarah Richardson, who is one of the people that worked on Bluebeard's Bride. So I was like, oh, pick this up. And so it's like girl gangs in like the late 70s kind of. So I'm pretty excited about that. And even more awesome is that Kurt is like really excited about it. Maybe even more so than I am. So that's awesome, because really if you have an excited GM and at least one player who's really stoked to do it, then you probably are going to have a good game. So that will be coming up. And then I wanted to mention, since we did an actual play, I don't know if it ever got posted or not, but Kyle Chenier, who has been on our podcast a couple of times and is a super awesome dude, is on his, is it?
HIO?
Yeah, HIO, that's it. To get some of his adventures. So there's Hell House Beckons, Von Bottom's Horde, Burlesque House Siege, and more importantly, you can pre-order Weird on the Waves. For like $11, you can get all those things from him. And he's awesome, and you should check out his stuff. And Weird of the Waves was a lot of fun. And I think that you'll like it if you like LOTFP or Kyle or OSR.
Or all of them.
Games. Basically, you should just check it out. And James will put up a link on our thing because I just said that he would right now.
Right on. Yeah, the game Lacey's talking about was from our second interview with Kyle, and he was talking about Weird on the Waves and where it was going, and I think it's still in development. I'm not sure if he's finished it yet, but
this is a pre-order, so apparently it's getting close.
Yeah, and then we have an actual play that is recorded, edited, and ready to go. Just waiting on him to sort of finalize some things. I told him we would put it out to help promote Weird on the Waves when it came done.
Anyways, he just put that up today, so I thought I would mention it.
Right on, very cool. Any other RPG stuff?
I think that's all I got right now.
Right on, very cool. So I know we got several other things at Gen Con that we haven't sort of picked through yet, but more
there's
of those
a lot
to
of
come.
Kickstarters that have recently finished, but nothing that I have in my... Oh, speaking of nothing that I have in my possession, there is something else. I didn't mention anything about it in the social media because I wasn't sure how to look at this awesome book that's sort of mine, but also yours. And by the way, I can't open it and look at it because somebody else is currently running it for me. So we got Maze of the Blue Medusa in the mail, and it's really pretty. And it took a lot of willpower and constraint for me not to open it up and take a sound look at it. But Carrie's still running that game for me and Lee. So I didn't want to give myself any spoilers. But yeah, so I think James has already maybe flipped through it. But
I have a little bit. I've read some of it. But
on the outside, it's a very beautiful book.
It is. But I don't think I'm going to be in that game. So that's why I was like, I'm going to read this anyway because I may use part of it or do something with it as well. So we will see. I like the idea of how a lot of the LTFP stuff is sort of connected together. And I would like to run something which is my plan with what we have going with Frostbitten and Mutilated, to sort of connect that one to a lot of the other gaming books and worlds and stuff that are involved with LOTFP. So.
I mean, if we're in Frostbitten and Mutilated and happen to end up in the Maze of the Blue Medusa, I would not be sad about that at all.
Well, it's there because the Desolated Lands are to the north of Vornheim. So it's in the same world.
There you go.
I like the idea of it. So right on. So you want to do board games? I've got one real quick one. You may have heard us mention that we got Tesla versus Edison Duel at Gen Con, and we sat down and played it quite a bit, and me and Lacey have played it, and me and our oldest Isaiah have played it, and he's 12, although he plays a lot of board games, so for the age part of it may be a little skewed for him because he plays games that, we don't look at the actual age on the box for things for him because he's played so many games. But it's a great two-player game. It's designed to play with two people, so it actually shines like a real game with two players because a lot of games that aren't designed for two players when you play with two just don't do as well. And it's fast, pretty fast and furious. It's like 15 to 30 minutes. A lot of fun and worth checking out. I had a good time with it.
I like that the tables can turn really fast in it. So you can feel like you're really far ahead, and then not even a round later, half a round later, you're like, oh, it's so close now. Or even oh, I am losing so badly. Because, sometimes with two-player games, one person gets ahead and then you're just sort of playing out the rest of it. And this is not like that. It's very swing back and forth.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I like it. The swing between turns is pretty big. So it's a lot of fun. I like it.
We acquired an NES Classic, and I don't play a lot of video games because I don't like the new ones. They're just shiny pictures that are similar to the old things that I used to play, but less awesome. And so I've been playing Dr. Mario, which is a lot of fun because we have a family of 5, and it's not a difficult concept to grasp. Dr. Mario. No, you just stack the colors on top of each other. Pieces fall faster, shenanigans ensue, whatever. But what's really cool about it is you can adjust the starting level. So, I am fairly experienced at the Dr. Mario and also just older and good at the puzzle solving thing because I've got a lifetime worth of experience, whereas our 7-year-old, a little less so because he's 7. So you can adjust the virus level. So I can be at a 10 while he's at a 3. And then we can go head to head, and it can still be competitive because you can make those adjustments. And you can adjust the speed as well. And so then we do, the pretty classic, okay, you lost, you pass the controller to the next person. And, as somebody gets a little bit better, you can adjust the virus level up harder. And then when James and I play, we just put it on max, and it's less of a competition to see who can win. than it is a competition to see who can lose the least fast.
Yeah.
So that's been a lot of fun. And we showed our kids classic Donkey Kong, and then they were kind of getting mad at him, like, why do you jump so slow? And I jumped right into the hammer. Why didn't I pick it up? And we played for like 30 minutes, and I think one person made it to the top. And then Pac-Man is like even worse. But probably the crowd favorite between me and James and our oldest son has been the original Legend of Zelda. Things were, files were created, tragedy struck as all the files were erased and everybody had to start over. And then it's been like a constant for our 12-year-old. Well, how do you get to this dungeon? How do you get to this thing? Right. Where was that thing at that you found? And what does this thing do? And basically us refusing to tell him because you have to wander around and do the thing. And then of course there's Google now, so you can just like look up the answers for anything.
Well, I told him no Googling. I don't know if he's followed it or not, but
I'm pretty sure so far he's stuck with it. However, he has very intently watched both of us play, as well as Lee when he came over played a little bit. So he's very intently watching everybody to see like what we found and well, I told him I was going to race him to the end and see how who could get there first, because I don't have a chance to play very often, but and he obviously has more time to play it if he wants, but I thought it would be fun to race him to the end to see who could beat Ganon first. But so Zelda has been fun. I also just started playing the very first Final Fantasy game with the black, red, and white mages and whatnot. And in true 1992 or whenever it was fashion for me, I named the I guess no, probably earlier than that, 1986 maybe. When does Final Fantasy 1 come out? I'm gonna guess 86. I don't know that I may have like dabbled in it, but pretty much just Zelda and Mario for me.
Right.
Was most of it, but
we'll ask the Google. So it looks like it came out in 1987. So in true 1987 fashion for me, my characters are named after people from Dragonlance. So I have Tannis, Tass, Rasslin, and Goldmoon with a fighter, thief, white mage, and black mage. And it's awesome and terrible. And it's funny to see that game, you can totally make it with the RPG Maker now so easily, and it's kind of crazy how much has changed as time has gone by, I guess, but it's still lots of fun. So I'm enjoying getting back into some old Nintendo games.
I think one of the other things that's been cool is that everybody kind of remembers something different. Mm-hmm. So like Holly came over when we were doing Night Witches and she was like, "Oh, Bubble Bobble."
Right.
And like that was like the game she remembered. And then I was going to ask, like, are there any games on there that you had completely forgotten about? And then you saw and were like, "Oh my gosh."
Not that I'd forgotten about.
There was one for me. And actually when I saw the name of it and even like the front cover, not ringing any bells at all. Star Tropics. Yeah. But I saw my brother playing the game and I was like, I remember this game, like with the yo-yo and the weird squid and the little things you hop on. I was like, what is this called? And he was like, oh, it's Star Tropics. It's like, that doesn't even sound vaguely familiar to me. But I remember this game now that I see you playing it. And I thought it was so weird.
Right. So lots of fun. They're totally worth it if you remember old school Nintendo stuff. We got it at Walmart for like $60 and it's been lots of fun. But yeah, old school Nintendo's fun. I don't know.
The other thing I thought was cool was seeing like our kids seeing the original version of other games they've played on the Wii.
Oh yeah.
They have some retro Mario stuff and so they've kind of seen that. But Punch Out was the one that really stood out to me. So like the difference between the Wii Punch Out and the Nintendo Classic Punch Out is like night and day, but they're like enjoying both of them. And like, what is this? It's really cool.
Yeah. It's kind of surreal in a way to be sitting there and playing it. And the amount of stuff that you remember is just sort of mind-blowing. I was like, oh, there's a thing here. And I know where this, the third labyrinth is over here and whatever.
Even more than the walking, the one that gets me is you're like, I'm pretty sure I can bomb right here and create a door that wasn't there a second ago.
Yeah.
Like, why is that still hanging out in my brain?
It's unbelievable the amount that you retain from it, but crazy. I
even found the one door that's just like the person that's like, now give me money for breaking my door. And you're like, oh, really?
So I think that's all the gaming stuff. I thought I just mentioned, I tweeted about it a little bit before, but I just started watching Battlestar Galactica. I'm on the third season. I think that's 2006 or something like that when the third season comes out. And it's really good. I really enjoy it. I think the first season is cool because it's pretty dark. There's not a lot of like high points for the humans. They're on the sort of on the run the entire time. And I think gonna go back once I finish it and go back and watch the first season specifically with an eye towards how the story progresses about running games where you have players that are always on the run and always being beaten down and whatnot, because the story is great and you don't feel beaten down by it. Like there's always this challenge and they're always struggling, but the story sort of keeps moving forward and progressing and keeps it interesting without just being this litany of tragedy, essentially, and I think it got some cool things to draw from there to see how to sort of tie that into role playing and whatnot. So been very, very excited to watch it. And yeah, I don't know, it's been really good. So I like it a lot. It's fun. And I seem to come to TV shows way after they're gone. So that's my thing. I don't know.
Yeah. I still haven't watched that one.
Kind of makes me sad though, because I'm like, I would have supported this show when it was on TV. I really like it, but I didn't watch it, so.
I think Firefly is probably the only thing I've been like that for.
Yeah.
Most of the things I'm like, well, that was cool. Or, I wish I hadn't started watching that since it ended in that cliffhanger.
Right.
But, I don't know if I have any like shows that are, I suppose you could translate some things into RPG worthiness. Mm-hmm. Battlestar Galactica seems like an obvious fit because it's kind of sci-fi nerdy. You know what I mean? Yeah. But like I watched Santa Clarita Diet, and that's just kind of like, it's just zombie but fun. It's not angry, scary zombie. Mm-hmm. It's like suburban housewife zombie.
Right.
Plus, there was kind of a, speaking of Firefly, I guess, Nathan Fillion is this, like a part character in the show, and he's just kind of fun. So there's a lot of good puns and silly jokes that happen there.
Right.
And what else? I watched the new season of Orange is the New Black, which is kind of like personal drama. It's good for that.
Yeah, right.
But I don't know, like a whole lot else. And what's the last thing? Oh, The 100. Mm-hmm. Which truthfully is probably only like an average show. I mean, it's pretty, I would say it's probably a little bit more plot intense than like Charmed or Buffy, but not like
right.
a lot. It's very obviously like young adult
WB
style fiction. But I just kind of decided that I would like it anyway. And our kids are watching it. And so I've at least watched like everything before them. So I know kind of what's going to be coming up for them and screened it a little bit. But now it's kind of a show we could watch together, which is cool. And it's got a little bit of sci-fi, but it's also kind of that fantasy world because they start off with like spaceship and then they have this kind of post-apocalyptic Earth that's very like rudimentary
right
technology and everything. So that's cool.
Right on. So I've got one more thing. Today I finished In the Heart of the Sea by Nathaniel Philbrick, and it is about the shipwreck of the Essex, which is sort of the inspiration for Moby Dick. It's a whaling ship from Nantucket that gets struck by a giant sperm whale, an 85-foot sperm whale. Hits this ship twice and sinks it. It breaks the ship in half, essentially, and sinks it. And then there are 3 whale boats full of men, full of sailors, that have to travel 2,500 miles by sea in the Pacific Ocean against the wind and all this other badness and tragedy, and they're poorly supplied and stuff. And
do some of them live? I mean, I guess they must if the story is a thing.
So
it just doesn't seem like they should or would.
They spent 97 days at sea and survived. Not all of them. There's some cannibalism that happens because they die. People die on the ship. And the beginning of it it's a really well put together thing. It's very historical, talks about whaling and stuff. So if you're running games that are in the ocean, which is really why I picked it up, part of it, but I just like ocean stuff and sailing and whatnot. But it talks about the realization of them turning to cannibalism and what that means and how it all works and all this stuff. And the tail end of it is very dark. But also like very honest about it. There's a part where they realize they're not going to survive, so they draw lots to see who will volunteer to get killed so that they can be eaten. And it's apparently
that's crazy.
It's a long-standing tradition at sea that's sort of what you do. Yeah, so they draw lots, and one of the guys on the ship, he's a 17-year-old guy, Owen Chase, maybe I think was his name. And then they draw lots again to see who will shoot him. And then they shoot him on a whale ship and they butcher him and eat him. And it doesn't go into graphic detail about it, but it's well done in that it sort of conveys the emotion and the impact of what's happening and how these men that survived have to sort of live with that. Mm-hmm. And the process of starvation and the changes that your body goes through, it talks about it quite a bit. And it mentions certain studies that they had during World War II, trying to figure out how your body replenishes itself and how long it takes. There's some really interesting things it talks about. And it's really, really well researched and really well done. And I found it to be very impactful without being gratuitous. It doesn't talk about a lot of gore or anything, and that stuff. It's very direct about and honest, but
it's not the gore that's unsettling in that situation, because we butcher animals and eat them all the time. That's that's not mm-hmm. It's the fact that it's a person. And
well, that's one of the things they talk about, because the first thing that they do is they remove all the parts that make them human. They take off their heads, hands, and feet, mm-hmm. and then they then they butcher the person. But what's interesting is they talk about several other shipwrecks and things that other places had done with their dead on the ships. And so at the beginning, they commend them into the sea and bury them at sea, and like they mm-hmm. do. But at a certain point, they realize they can't survive. So then that's when they turn to cannibalism. But there was another shipwreck another shipwreck that happened, and they used the pieces of the body of the men to fish, and then caught and killed sharks and ate the sharks, and were able to survive much easier by doing that than actually eating their comrades.
So then you wonder, was the cannibalism really necessary?
Well, it's very interesting. I didn't expect to gain so much knowledge of starvation and cannibalism by reading it, because it's not why I was reading it. But the guy that wrote it does a really great job of sort of drawing you into the story and the tragedy of these people, and sort of the strength of will and the ability to endure and suffer and all this stuff through the entire ordeal. And it's incredible. It's unbelievable. But it's all true, and a lot of the stuff that's in there is firsthand accounts of from books that the men that survived wrote. So yeah, unbelievable. I don't know.
It is so interesting how much the ocean and space have in common.
Yeah,
because completely alien, unsurvivable if you don't have the proper equipment. Mm-hmm. The creatures within that environment are so completely inadapted in a way that you are not, and the severe disadvantage that you're at mm-hmm. as a result of that.
Mm-hmm. It's unbelievable, because they talk about they're in this sort of whaling boat, so it's like a long boat, right? Like a whale boat a rowboat that's more designed for speed, right? So they're not designed to be out at sea for a long time. They're actually kind of fragile. And a shark appears at one point to sort of investigate what this boat is, and it's sort of gnawing at the tail of the ship. And they're trying to drive it away. And they're so completely, like you said, incapable of defending themselves in the water. It's unbelievable. And the inhospitability of the sea, and the way rain squalls and waves and all this. Mm-hmm. It's just, it's unbelievable. It was an incredible read. I loved it, but I don't know that I will read it again. It's just different. I don't know. So it's definitely, if you're running a game that has elements of that kind of stuff, the ocean or whatever, it's definitely worth checking out, because what it does a good job of is conveying what the realities of every single sailor knew when they left. That they knew, when they talk about drawing lots to see who was going to get shot and eaten, they just all agreed to it. This is what we do. This is the tradition at sea, so that we can, at least some of us can survive. And they'd all sort of consign themselves to this. That's what life is right now. So it's a interesting way to sort of learn the realities of the world that they existed in, that isn't all glorified and Hollywooded up or whatever.
So. Right. Not everybody is Jack Sparrow.
True story. Right on. So anything else? I don't want to end on a note of cannibalism and death.
Some reading. I can't remember if I talked about it when we did the Gen Con wrap up, because I had finished it then, but I had ordered and read through the latest volume of Regression, mm-hmm. which I feel like I talked about at some point before, at least the first couple of issues. It's basically this libertine ghost that's reincarnated inside a regular guy. And there's a cult and murder and mayhem and past lives, hence the name regression, like regression therapy, and a lot of horror and body horror and grossness and just really good stuff. So I was pretty excited about that. I don't want to go into too many details because I know that I loaned that to Carrie when we were looking at talking about horror inspiration, and I think she's going to be using that when she does her horror episode breakdown.
Okay, so, right on, very cool.
And then the other thing that I'm really excited about, I have such an extensive backlog reading list right now because of school, but Shanna Germain that works with Monty Cook and did like No Thank You Evil and is also a writer. I'd never read any of her stuff before, but I picked up while we were at Gen Con in the auction area for a very discounted price, the Poison Eater, and it is a Numenera kind of
novel,
fan fiction, I guess. Novel. I guess it's not fan fiction if you're one of the writers and you write it, but you get what I'm saying. Like it's inspired by Numenera in that setting,
right, in that world,
and it's a fictional book set in that world. And so I'm pretty excited to get to delve into that at some point. So
right on.
I got another one of the Numenera fiction books as well. But I'm most excited about this one.
Right on. Very cool. Well, do you have anything else to mention, or we wrap this guy up, or?
I think that's all I got.
Right on. So as you know, we are a member of the Gonna Geek Network. So quick promo for All Things Good and Nerdy, episode 325, Too Much News. There's too much news this week. So much that Chris talks about Amazon removing a new game pre-order discount to start the show. Later on, Willie shares his love of Until Dawn. Anthony geeks out about the return of Conan to the Marvel Comics. And Chris leads a discussion on what film will replace Guardians of the Galaxy 3 in the Marvel's movie schedule. So check them out. That is All Things Good and Nerdy, episode 325 on the Gonna Geek Network. And I think that'll do it for us this week. So hopefully you guys will find some cool inspiration or new games to check out and try. If there's anything cool that you guys have tried and got to your table that you'd like to share with us, drop us a line on our Facebook group or on Twitter at JustMoreFix. Or you can email me, James at JustMoreFix, and we'll give you a shout on the show. Otherwise, we will see you guys next week. Thanks for listening. This has been an episode of Just One More Fix. Music has been provided by Kevin MacLeod. You can find him at Incompetech.com. You can support us at Patreon.com/JustOneMoreFix or follow us on Twitter at JustOneMoreFix.